Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we believe mental illness can be temporary and transformative. Stay tuned for innovative, effective tools from experts in the field of mental health. Hosted by Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist. This podcast aims to change the narrative around mental illness. Move from a place of fear to a place of hope and solutions. Here on Your Mind.
Kristina Driskill, Doctorate of Musical Arts, is an international opera singer turned transformational coach and consultant, author, and presenter. Her light-hearted yet deeply intuitive approach has empowered high performers to live and work with ease, fun, and flow since 2007. Chris's fascination with mental fitness and mindset began with her doctoral research on performance anxiety, and her current work focused on self-sabotage, which is backed by the evidence-based research of positive intelligence. She is a certified coach in business coaching, mindset coaching, and she holds a doctorate in performance from West Virginia University, in addition to holding a certification in social emotional arts from UCLA Arts and Healing, part of the UCLA program of integrative medicine. Bridging the gap between intuition, science, and strategy, Kris guides her clients through her signature conscious reality method, a life-changing process that results in higher performance, improved relationships, and a greater sense of self, success, and fulfillment. Well, Kris, thank you so much for joining us. It's delightful to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me. It is a joy and an honor to be here.
I'm hoping you can get us started by telling us a little bit about how you got into the work you're doing now and what drives your passion for it.
Sure. So this has been kind of a long journey, and as you mentioned, I came from the world of opera before coming into coaching and consulting. And when I was in that world, I was also teaching, and I was in academia for 10 years. And between my own experience in that world, which is very much a right-wrong dynamic, it's very much based on excellence, and it comes with a lot of desire to be perfect. And so that was very much part of my life. And when I came into teaching, I started to notice I didn't want to teach that way. I didn't want to teach with that right-wrong model. And when I would have students come into my studio, I would notice that the more we worked on them as a person, meaning I didn't just focus on their voice, I was focusing on what was going on in their thoughts. I was focusing on what they were feeling in their body, that they started having significant improvement in their voice as a result, but it was also affecting other areas of their lives. So as I did this work, I felt called to kind of create a bigger ripple effect. Students started coming to me for other things. Hey, I'm having this trouble with my boyfriend, or hey, I'm scared to go home and tell my parents this stuff. And I started realizing, hey, well, okay, this kind of information, this kind of work that goes into mindset is having a much bigger effect than just voice. And I became fascinated with that work. So when I did my doctorate, I focused on performance anxiety. I did that for singers, but it actually applies to anybody that comes into this world of being a high performer. And I really got very curious about how the brain works and about how our social emotional center affects everything that we're trying to achieve in our lives. So when I started diving into that work and started having people come to me more and more in this way, I just decided I wanted to transition into focusing on that. And so I started going into consulting, first for performing arts, and then it just started to spread out into a larger field. So the work that I'm currently doing, as you mentioned, this kind of focus on self-sabotage, really came about into my own story, and realizing that I was putting so much, and had been doing this ever since I was a child, really, putting so much pressure on myself to do a great job, to be perfect, to have everything done right and well, that it was creating a lot of stress and anxiety in me internally. And I kept pushing and pushing. And of course, when I started my own practice, my own business, The pressure was on again. This is, make sure you're building this thing. This needs to be successful. And so when I came across focusing on saboteurs, I thought at first that work would be just another tool. I did not, and I think this is true for most high performers. If you ask a high performer or high achiever, "Hey, are you self-sabotaging?" I think the answer is almost always no. No, I'm not doing that. Which is, of course, what I would have thought as well. But getting into that work, I just realized that I couldn't ignore how many of those little voices in my head were things that I had created over the years based on this insistence of trying to be right, trying to be good, having that acceptance approval that ever since I was a little child, I had kind of brought into my own belief system of needing to operate a certain way to do that. So I became absolutely fascinated with that. I dove into that work. It created really transformative shifts in my own life. And so I decided to bring that work into the coaching and consulting that I do with my clients as well. And I like to do it with fun. I like to do it from a place of lightness. You see, I've got a little crime board behind me here for those who are seeing the visual part of this. It looks like one of those little crime boards, and I've got pictures of all my saboteurs on here, and we
Some of
all
them
we all
look
have
some
these.
of them look oddly like you.
They're all me. They're all me. And we all have these. This is a universal archetype. It's part of all of our lives. We created these personas and these beliefs for ourselves, as a means for survival when we were children. And we've grown up reinforcing them if they worked. They came from something smart and clever in our minds originally. Hey, don't go in there. People are fighting. Avoid that. Hey, when you do well, people give you gold stars and tell you you're wonderful and give you hugs and tell you they love you. Keep that going. So we had these ideas that these are the things that were going to help us survive. But over
And
the
they did
years,
for
and
a
they
while.
did,
Yeah.
they did. They are strengths in and of themselves. But over time, they become used and abused in such a way that these voices in our minds start to put stress on us that if we don't do those things, we're not going to be okay. And so it starts to create suffering. It starts to create negative response factors within us. And once I started doing that work and really looking at it and seeing them as these characters, I started seeing their faces and what they looked like and what they sounded like, and I started noticing, that the things that they said were almost like these loop recorded messages. They don't have very big vocabularies.
They don't grow over time.
That's right. They
Right?
don't grow over
They
time.
solidify over time.
That's right. That's right. So I, along with most of us, had built these very strong neural pathways that said, this is the truth. This is the thing you need to believe. This is the thing that's going to make you great or okay or safe or happy. And yet, here I was feeling that stress, feeling that anxiety, feeling that pressure. And when I started to recognize that and take their power away, and I do that by making them fun, seeing them as these characters, so to speak, and that lends itself to my background, but it made it so easy to just see them as what they are, as opposed to my truth, and opposed to things that are really, really the reality of my world. I created that world, so I could just create a new world with the actual truth and allow those to become strengths again, as opposed to things that were holding me back and creating all those kinds of negative response factors.
So how do you allow something that has been functioning in your life as a saboteur to become a strength?
Well, they were strengths to begin with, right? So there's nothing wrong with, like, for example, one of my top ones is this guy right here. He has a masculine background. My hyperachiever's name is Simon. I made acronyms for all of them. So Simon's name stands for Success is My Only Need. And he has this kind of Slavic gym coach thing going on. I had a coach like this that would push and push and push. And it reminds me of this coach that I had when I was younger in my life. And so I hear that voice all the time. But originally, it was part of me that persevered. It was part of me that set goals and said, hey, go for this. It's the part of me that had courage. And so those were the strengths of my achiever mentality. But over time, noticing that I got, attention, approval, do this.
Boy, I
You've
hope
got to
that's
do
not
this.
me. What did you come to realize about the acronym Simon for this character that you could then turn into a strength for you?
So the strength of Simon, when it's not being overused and abused and coming from a place of fear, is that perseverance, is that goal setting, is that ability to step into courage, is to have the opportunity to do the great and wonderful things you want to do in your life. But if I can come back to that place and detach myself from the outcome, that's when it becomes a strength again. Simon's very attached to the outcome. If you don't get that, if you don't get that thing, if you don't make it, if you aren't successful, if you don't have this amount of things happen this particular month, then you're failing. You're not going to be okay.
The key word for me in what you said is the fear. Simon's
Oh, yeah.
coming from fear. And my understanding is that each of the saboteurs, when they get activated, are responding to an interpretation of the world that leads to fear.
100%. They're all fear-based.
They're all fear-based. And one of my favorite teachers says, Guy Finley says, if you listen to what fear tells you and you act based on what your fear tells you, the only thing fear is ever going to tell you is what to do so that fear can run your life another day.
That's exactly right. They want to be running the show because they come from that place that says, hey, we're going to protect you.
Yeah.
We are going to keep you okay. So they don't want to be told to go away. They want to have the loudest voice in the room, right? So when they show up, I think one of the biggest issues is the fact that they sound so believable. They don't sound like voices that you would easily ignore, especially having developed them over years since childhood. My judge, who I call Marty, here, I'll give you a close up. Here's Marty. Here's my Marty. Very black and white, Marty, and her name stands for makes awful remarks to you. Because that's what she does. But it's done in a very cool way. My judge. Some people's judges are very harsh, very mean. My judge is very cool. She says things like, "Oh, you did it like that?" And makes a little face and so it's very easy to hear that and be like, "Oh no. Oh, I've done it wrong. Oh no, I'm messing up. Oh no, I'm failing." Because it sounds so real. Our saboteurs have been created our minds to really be believable. And so we have to start by trying to figure out, okay, what do they sound like? How do we identify them when they show up? What is that particular voice saying? And what does it sound like? And what are the words that they use? So that when it does show up, we can see it for what it is. It's not our reality unless we choose it to be.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking in terms of how each of these things were created at a time when, at whatever age I was feeling like I needed help or protection. And so that's why they're rooted in fear. And then they don't, as we mentioned earlier, they don't integrate and grow in wisdom. They don't accumulate the knowledge of my experience as a person. There is a part of me that does that. What do you call that?
The part of you that knows now.
The sage, the wise old owl. What is it?
Yeah. So we have these parts of our brain that go off, right? These give us these negative response factors as a response to fear. That's where all these come from. That's where all these saboteurs live. They live in those regions of the brain that give us these negative response factors: shame, blame, guilt, jealousy, frustration, anger, anything that feels negative. I do not consider grief a negative response factor, just to make sure that that's clear to everybody. I think that's a completely separate topic. But then we have these other parts of our brain that engage the positive response factors, things like creativity, empathy, compassion, exploration, innovation, navigation, activation, being able to focus, calm, clear headed focus and ability to think with clarity. But you can't just jump from one to the other just because you're smart. And I think this is where smart people and high performers and high achievers and talented people really get caught up. Intellectually, they know that. intellectually, they know, I don't like the way I feel and I want to feel like this. And so they try to tell themselves from that place of intellect, I shouldn't feel like this, I should feel like that. And they get frustrated because they can't just jump over there. Those places where all of our positive response factors are located tend to have much weaker pathways than the ones that are negative. As Shirzad Shamin, points out all the time in his work through positive intelligence, it's much more important, to remember the poisonous berry and make sure that you don't eat that than to remember the beautiful colors of the butterfly and the joy that you had for experiencing that. Your survivor brain wants you to stay focused on what's
The
going to save
irritants,
and
the
protect you.
problems, right?
Anything that's a problem. And this is
The
why
negativity.
perfectionism, all these things show up. You can do something brilliant, something amazing and wonderful, and your mind will try to focus on the one thing you did wrong because they want to make sure you don't do that again. Don't do that. Because that's what's going to keep us, that's what's going to make us unsafe. That's what's going to take that safety away from us. And so we're creating our own world of suffering, not even realizing a lot of times that there's an option, that is optional.
So Shirzad calls it the sage.
Yes.
Richard Schwartz from Internal Family Systems calls it your higher self or your capital S self, and has the list of 8 words that begin with the letter C: the clarity, the creativity, the calmness, the connectedness, etc. I was just asking, on the board behind you, as you have your saboteurs up there, do you have the positive side of you with an acronym and a name?
I don't have something separate for the sage because to me, that is me. It's sitting here right in front of you. I'm able to tap into that just by realizing it. So for me, in my mind's eye, she's not outside of me like these are. She is me. And the moment that I let all of that go, that saboteur side of things, and connecting and attaching to that as reality, the moment I let that go, then my truth shines.
And I'm thinking in terms of how, because we just talked about how the brain has this, you might call it an evolutionary predisposition for the negative, to overpredict
Absolutely.
the negative, and as the book Buddha's Brain would point out, to also overpredict the satisfaction or enjoyment we're going to get from the positive that hasn't come yet. And so to retrain my brain to get a stronger set of connections for this sitting in the comfort of my true self with the calm, clarity, security, creativity, inquisitiveness, etc., I practice something. What is it that you practice? How do you get from the flood of the saboteurs coming to the forefront because something in your life has been interpreted as negative or scary or dangerous? How do you then make the shift over to your core self?
Well, the way we do that in the positive intelligent work is through sensory focus. So, as I mentioned, a lot of people will try to do that intellectually. They will try to think their way over to positive. And you see the look on everyone's face when someone says, well, just think positive. No one likes that. No one likes to be told that. And it doesn't work. You can't just think positive when you're wrapped up in those negative response factors. So what we turn to is a sensory focus exercise, and we can use our sight, we can use our sense of touch. We constantly use things like rubbing two fingers
Fingertips, yeah.
together, right? Rub your fingertips together with such attention that you can feel the fingertip ridges, and you put all of your attentional focus on that, or feeling the temperature of your palm with your fingertip, or feeling the texture of your clothing, or even the desk that you're sitting in. Noticing the feeling of the breath going in through the nose and the temperature as it goes in versus the temperature that goes out. Feeling what it feels like to be in our seat so that we get out of our brains and into our bodies, so to speak, and allow ourselves to kind of come to this neutral point in the mind. Once we're into that space, we have a much better chance of being able to get over to those positive regions and start to ask ourselves those questions that will come from those positive, strengths-oriented spaces. What's needed now? What's most important for me? Where's my attention needed? What do I need? And staying over in that side. We can't even go there when we're in those negative regions in the brain. It's two different parts, and they don't operate the same.
Yeah, there's the idea that some solid research indicates that if I have fear active, I can't tap into my joy. It blocks it. And if I'm willing to or able to program myself, train myself to focus on gratitude thoughts and joy thoughts and bring that up, that likewise blocks the fear response.
Yeah, try to do it. Try to be happy and sad at the same time. Try to be scared and joyful at the same time. You can't. It's one or the other. Now you can go back and forth if you want. If you could do that for yourself, you can, but you can't do it at the same time. So I like to call that consciously redirecting my thoughts and building that skill. As you said, it is a skill. To me, is very much, we need to think about this like we go to the gym and train our muscles and build our muscles. And I think smart people oftentimes get a little caught up in this because they assume because they're smart that they're just going to be able to do it. And that would be like going to the gym and saying, all right, I looked at all the machines, I learned the machines, I know what they do, and now I'm going to do a couple of reps.
And I'll get strong.
Where's my strong body?
Where's my bulk?
Where is it?
Where's that definition they promised?
Exercises, exactly. So, but for some reason, we do this all the time with our minds. We think it's a different process. It's obvious in the body. You ask somebody, do you think you're going to go into the gym and have your body built, after being there for 20 minutes? They would say, no, of course not. And yet they expect it out of their minds. They expect that if they learn the concept, that they will be able to implement it and assimilate it and execute it just like that.
Well, and it's based on the false assumption that the thoughts can provide a solution, when in fact, it's the errant application of thought that's producing the problem, right?
And it leads back to emotion. It's really not even, you can't think happy. You feel happy. So if you're trying to do it with your mind, if you're trying to intellectualize the process, you're probably going to end up right back in that frustrated space because it just doesn't work that way.
Well, and the thing you're tapping into about using physical stimulation, awareness of the physical and this present moment awareness, we've been using it for decades to help people who have a panic attack or an anxiety attack. Talk about 3 things you can see, 3 things you can hear, 3 things you can feel, etc. Taking it to another level, I recently had the honor of interviewing Marcia Bonito Warren, and she has the new book, Movement and Identity, Multiculturalism, Somatic Awareness, and Embodied Code Switching. This deeper awareness of these physiological changes that happen when I walk into a room and the people in there are arguing, or I walk into a room and the people in there are trying to have an intimate conversation that I just interrupted, kind of thing.
Or staring at me, or I think they're more important than me, or any of those things, right? That our body has a reaction to. And one of the things I love about this kind of practice and bringing it into these different forms is that you don't have to go into it. You don't have to walk away and go like, I need to go meditate for half an hour and then I'll be ready for this. Like, you don't have to go away. I can focus on the color of someone's shirt, the color around the pupils of their eyes, the sound and timbre of their voice, and be able to get myself into that space while I'm in real time.
Right. And usually in a few seconds, right? 5-10 seconds of that focus.
10 seconds is all we need, really, to give us an initial start. Now, there's a caveat, of course, which is that if your fear around that particular circumstance or experience or thought that you're having is way stronger than your ability, just like building the muscles, right? If you want to go pick up a 100-pound weight, but you're only really ready to pick up 20 pounds, you may not be able to get over there very fast. That's our indicator. Oh, I need to do more of my skill building. I need to keep working on this. And if anyone's like me, it's a lifelong process. Just because you get it.
With results along the way. So it's not like you have to do a whole lifetime before you see results.
No.
Sometimes when I talk to people about that, they panic. Wait a minute, I got to do this forever before I find anything? No, you'll find results right away. And yet you're not going to get as strong as you're going to be in 5 years from now in 5 days.
That's right. And again, it's a great the physical body is such a wonderful example because we can see it. If you take the time to build the strength in the body and then you stop, your body will start to atrophy and go
Right.
back to
We
where it
lose the
was.
edge. We lose the
You
edge
lose
fairly
that.
quickly, yeah.
You lose that, right? So it's the same thing. If you build up these neural pathways, you build up that strength in the mind, so to speak, it's going to help you as long as you continue to do that. It's going to serve you and it's going to continue to serve you better and better and better. But if you stop because you already know it, because you get to that place where you say, no, I don't have to do that anymore, you'll still be okay for a while, just like the body will stay strong for a while. But eventually, those things will start to atrophy.
Well, and the things that have been practiced for decades will come back and their momentum will keep
That's
building.
right.
And the next thing you know,
That's right. Then you get
we're
these guys coming back
there you go.
with their loudness again. They never really truly go away. They're part of who we are. And to me, they're nothing to be afraid of. They're nothing to push down. They're nothing to fight back against. A lot of people think, oh, you got to punish them. You got to fight it back. It's you. And those are the parts of you that mean so well. Now, they're not doing a good job. They're not helpful in the way that they think they're being helpful, but it is you. So to me, our saboteurs need love more than anything. They
Well, and
need to
appreciation,
feel safe.
right?
Yeah, they need to feel appreciated, they need to feel heard,
Because they
and
do
they need
have an offering, right? They have an awareness.
yeah,
And if I can become aware of what my saboteurs have become aware of, they usually find it first, right? They're this
well,
hypersensitive to the
they've
negativity.
been telling us
If
forever.
I can tap into that before they feel sick and tired of shouting in my ear, and now they're sick and tired of waiting for me, so they come up and grab the controls and start acting in a way that's not very productive.
Yeah,
If I can tap into their energy, their awareness, their input sooner, I can bring to bear my adult level coping mechanisms to help satisfy the need they've identified.
that's right. That's our ability to bring what I like to focus on ease, fun, and flow. I mean, how do you want your life to feel? Do you want it to feel hard? Do you want it to feel constricted? Do you want it to feel stressful? Do you want to suffer? No, I don't think anybody would raise their hand and say, yes, that sounds fantastic. I'd like to sign up for that. Right? Nobody wants to feel that way. So when we hear these voices, even if they're mean, even if they're panicking, even if they're screaming, we can treat that very much like we would a child who says harsh things or screams or has a temper tantrum. You can get caught up in that. You can scream back. You can try to win a match. You can punish them. But really, what tends to be most effective is being calm, listening, letting them feel validated, asking questions, and allowing them to make that transition, make that shift. And you know what? That child voice is what all of these are, and it's still a part of every single one of us. So if we can learn to treat these voices from our own selves in that way, then we can get back into that ease, fun, and flow so much more quickly.
Ease, fun, and flow. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I was listening to Shirzad's book and he was talking about the curiosity, the inquisitiveness, I think about the ancient wisdom that comes down and says we need to learn to live in that questioning state without demanding an answer
Yeah.
because our brain needs to grow and expand to be able to even comprehend the answer to a good question. And if I understand that there's a part of me that's ready, willing, and able to do that, if it's not getting short circuited by the saboteurs, then I can come back and calm and center and wait for my own experience to expand and show me things that I wasn't able to see yesterday or last week.
I love that idea of experience expansion, that we don't know what we know until we know it, right? And if we're never giving ourselves an opportunity to even go there, well, then how could we?
It sounds like what you've done is taken the work from the Positive Intelligence book by Shirzad Shamin and expanded it significantly with the naming of your characters and the acronyms for their names, and the playfulness that it might have been there in Shirzad's book, but I didn't get the flavor of playfulness from that book that I'm getting from listening to you. So, are there other ways that you bring play and fun into your self-awareness work?
I think any time we are feeling heaviness, constriction, stress, agitation is an opportunity to invite play. I'm typing an email. I'm stressed about writing the email. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to upset somebody. Now, is that the kind of energy that I want to send this email off with? No, I do not. Again, no one's going to sign up for, hi, here's a really stressed, agitated email. Please read it, and I'd love to hear your response. We want to send something with joy, with curiosity, with invitation. So I want to switch that in for me. To me, the fastest way to shift something over is through play. So if I'm going to put on music and move around for a minute, if I'm going to move my hands silly on the keyboard, if I'm going to, move my body in a different way that I would not normally move it, maybe I'll pick up pencils like a dancer or do something that takes me out of that loop of this is serious. This is something that you have to be very serious about. This is important. The results of this are important. Attachment outcome. So to me, play helps to detach us from the outcome. In Richard Rudd's Gene Key's work, he has this kind of concept, of course, which is throughout all kinds of psychology, practices of darkness and lightness, or shadow and gift, as he calls it. And he talks about the shadow of desire. There's nothing wrong with desire. It's just like the characteristics of our saboteurs. There's nothing wrong with desire. It's when a desire gets so attached to outcome that you think you're not going to be okay if you don't get it. And there's where all of our stress and anxiety and agitation and frustration comes from. And the opposite side of that, the gift side of that, he calls lightness. And to me, it's about finding that lightness. And lightness and levity to me are not making fun of things, making light of things, so much as bringing them into the light. Remembering what it was like when we were children and we laughed and played just for the sheer sake of doing so. You didn't need a reason and you didn't need to earn it. You just played.
And it's in that mode when we're young that our brains are expanding exponentially and learning. It's in the play mode that we learn more. It's in the what if, in the childlike curiosity mode, that we actually expand our intellectual capacity. It's amazing.
And it's been trained out of us, hasn't it? I mean, I love that talk that Sir Ken Robinson gives about, starting as children and all these things that we do. And then as we go through the school system and grow up, it slowly moves its way up into our body to where you're just a brain after a while. It's all about your grades. It's all about your ranking. It's all about the numbers. It's all about getting in. It's all about your future. And there's no more question asking. There's no more, unless you specifically take a class that's creative based, like a choir class or an art class. That is not a requirement of the essence of your growth anymore, according to our system. And so we come into adulthood with all of this seriousness and all this pressure. And then we go to seminars and we go to things and people say, oh, lighten up, relax, you got to relax. And we wonder why it's so difficult to do that. Well, it's been trained out of us.
Well, and even at that level, if you don't relax, you're doing it wrong. It's always
you were wrong
dichotomy.
here, now you're wrong there.
Yeah.
And this is a process. Bringing us back to ourselves. That's what Shirzad calls sage brain, these parts of the brain that bring us into these positive response factors. This is the essence of our true self. So it's not something, the way I look at it, it's not something you have to learn. It's something to come back to. It's always been there. It never went away. You just covered it up and strengthened a bunch of other stuff. So it wasn't as easy to find.
And falsely labeled the tightness, the tension, the judgment, actual error in thought, labeled it the truth.
And so that's what's going to get you ahead.
That's right.
And that became the belief.
The ability to see that the tightness and the tension and the judgment is false.
Yeah.
And, I've worked with this for years, and I was so pleased that Shirzad had this in his book, the idea of the difference between discernment and judgment.
Yes.
Right? So I can tell that the couch is a dark blue and the chair is a dark brown and the desk is a lighter brown, but I'm not telling you one color is better than another. I'm discerning the difference and they're all okay just as they are, as opposed to, wow, what an ugly chair color.
Right.
And as soon as I judge, I've got tightness, I've got tension, I've got conflict. And now I'm in that part of the brain that wants to do the dichotomy and the judging. And it's all about, as we talked about earlier, it always boils down to then fear.
Yeah.
Fear of being judged, fear of getting it wrong, fear of being attacked, etc.
I gave up the concept of bad and good based on discernment a long time ago. I live in an area now. It's a forested area, and I'm in Northern California, so we have a lot of wildfire stuff here. And it's very easy to think about something like that and label it bad. It's bad. That's bad. And yet, forests need to go through this kind of clearing out and regrowth phase. There are certain trees that do not release seeds unless they go through the fire process. There are things that do not renew and regrow in a healthy way unless it goes through an experience like that. So, is it bad or is it good? Or maybe we just allow it to be something that happens. And that's kind of what I've come to for myself, that we don't need to. I think, and you can tell me if this is your opinion as well or not, but I think that we created bad and good as a way to easily organize our minds so that we don't have to think about things. We don't have to really discern or contemplate, wow, that's something, would I consider that bad or good? If we label it bad, we can just go, "Oh my gosh, that happened, it's bad," and we're done. We don't have to actually go through that contemplative process. That's why it's so easy to see someone who is not like us. They're not of my political party, they're not of my race, they're not of my socioeconomic status, they're not, and label them as whether they are accepted or unaccepted by us. Just because our brains are trying to easily categorize things, and I think that's a disservice to our minds.
Well, it creates that tension, right? It creates the fear. And what we know is the closer we move toward that fight or flight response, the less blood is going to the brain and the more blood is going to, the back and the legs, and less blood goes to the internal organs. So all of that blood is ready for the muscles to fight or run. But if it's a really important issue, wouldn't I want more blood in my brain? Wouldn't I want the nutrients in there to do the psychological and the logical and intellectual processing? Yes, I would, right? So the more I judge, the more I move away from optimal level of functioning in the brain.
That's right, and what's interesting is that most people don't realize, and that we've all heard of, fight or flight. And that's usually the way it's presented, fight or flight. And I was doing my research in performance anxiety. I thought it was very interesting to acknowledge the fact that, number one, fight and flight are not first. Right? Freeze is first. When you're walking through the woods and you hear something, you hear a twig snap, you don't start running automatically. You don't turn around to defend yourself. You stop. You freeze in place and listen. So, in our body's response system, freeze is actually what happens to people the most, right? Fight. Fight comes after flight. First, we're going to try to get out of there, right? So, fighting is like a last resort for things. So, we don't typically get to that point with the stuff that's in our own minds. It causes us to freeze, which means we want to do something. We want to feel a certain way. We want to experience a certain level of success or a goal, but something in there is creating that conflict for us, and so we just don't do it. We procrastinate. We get stuck. We feel self-doubt. That's the freeze. And it just kind of stays in that loop unless we can recognize it, start to identify that, as you said, realize, hey, that's only your reality if you say so, and be able to kindly and gently move ourselves out of that.
Yeah, I've appreciated over the years how different people have come up with the fight, flight, freeze, fawn. There are going to be 7 other F's before we're done that they're identifying as patterns, because it all comes down to what have we trained ourselves to do? And if I'm training myself to judge, as if we're raised in this Western culture, you've been trained to judge.
Yeah.
Your language is based on judgment. Your language is based on a nearly one-to-one correspondence between a word and an object. Well, that's not the same as every culture. There are cultures in which a single letter would take several sentences or a paragraph to describe in our language. And if you put 2 or 3 of those together, it might take half a book to describe the potential meanings for these 3 or 5 letters structured together. And so the complexity of that fluid level of thinking, we don't have so much in the Western world. We've got this, it's a dichotomy. It's good, it's bad, it's left, it's right, it's heavy, it's light. And you're one of us or you're not, right? You're
Us
the other.
versus them. I think you've really identified it, that to me, this is the foundation of all constriction. This is the foundation of all agitation, hesitation, most of our negative response factors. This us versus them mentality. And I understand it comes from our survivor brain and coming from this place that says, hey, if there's one of me and there's 100 of them and they don't like me, I don't have a very good chance of surviving. So it puts me in that state. It puts me in that kind of mentality. And I think, because of the fact that we came from, a type of life where we lived outside. There were dinosaurs. There were things where you had to do.
But we were in the food chain, not at the top of it.
That's right.
Right.
That's
so
right.
we were as much prey as we were predator.
Yeah. So it was
And in
them,
that-
them, us, then us, then us, then us, then them. And so
that kind of judgment and discernment that developed in us for a level of physical survival has been adopted with no adaptation, but adopted whole and placed over our emotional system. And I have a talk I give to people. I talk about how survival or anger is a survival level defense mechanism.
100%.
So please, if you ever get angry about anything, take a breath, scan the world around you, and make sure that you and your loved ones are physically safe. And as soon as there's no life and death threat to you or your friends and family, then realize your anger is an erroneous response. It is now going to cause more problems in your life than it could ever solve.
That's right.
And breathe and soften and choose a different interpretation that lets you drop out of that anger response into a curious, creative, fluid ability to let the truth of life act on you and you respond in a flow. Things are going to go much, much better if you can do that.
And I think it's helpful to recognize that in others as well, because when somebody else's saboteurs are activated, it's very easy for that to activate ours. Somebody says something rude, somebody yells something, somebody's very judgmental. It's very easy to stand up and come right at them with that same energy. Like those mirror neurons work, right? You're going to be nasty at me, I'm going to be nasty at you kind of behavior. So if we can recognize, hey, that is someone that you need to see as a scared child right now. That is all that is. You are looking at a scared 5-year-old child in an adult body having an experience. And if you can see that, then you can help yourself, train yourself to come toward compassion and empathy and understanding for the experience that particular human is having in this moment, rather than getting yourself caught up in that same type of behavior, getting a sabotage feedback loop going between the two of you.
Or you interpreting falsely that there's anything about you in what they're saying.
Yeah.
Right? Because the only thing that is ever going to be learned by what comes out of my mouth is you're going to learn about what's going on inside of me.
And you said it earlier. The only way you're ever going to find out is if you ask questions. I think this is I think we could, let's solve the world's problems right now. If everyone would just ask questions instead of telling and trying to prove that they're right as the number one and number two things, if we could ask questions first, get curious.
With the intent of what? What's your goal in asking questions?
I want to understand your intention. I want to understand you.
Exactly.
I want to know your true meaning. I want to say, wow, that felt like this to me. Was that what you meant from that? well, what did you mean by that? Or why is that important to you? Or you sound very, connected to that information. Tell me what that's about. We don't go there. We immediately go to that defense place, right? Or offense place where, I don't like your opinion. I don't like what you said. So I need to assert my truth or my opinion on top of yours. And again, now we're back to us versus them instead of saying, oh, here's a person who has said something, done something that I can feel in my body. I'm having some sort of a, resistance to. Now I want to get curious about that as opposed to going into judgment.
Well, and I just keep working with people to say, listen, if you can understand that whatever comes out of my mouth is only, always, and forever going to tell you about what's going on inside me,
Mm,
and you start to apply that observation to yourself and others, then you realize whenever you hear anger, fear, insult, or name calling coming out of somebody, you instantly know that person's got pain, fear, or sadness going on inside of them that they either feel incapable or unwilling to deal with inside of themselves, and it's got nothing to do with you. So
that's
now
right.
you're in front of that scared 5-year-old that you're talking about,
Yeah.
or that hurt
Yeah.
5-year-old, or that
I
really
don't It's like
sad
holding up a
5-year-old.
sign, right? You hold up a sign above your head that says, "Hello, I'm an adult and I do not know how to express myself in a productive way. Please excuse me while it comes out like this." And I
Right.
think if we had that sign, we would be more patient.
Well, and if we can train ourselves to remember that that's what's going on,
Yeah.
then we don't generate the offense.
Yeah, we don't get
Another
involved at
another
that
of my
level.
favorite lines that came to me years ago to start telling people is, "Please don't take offense, even if it's offered, because I'm the one that creates the feeling of being offended. But if somebody comes up and throws an insult at me and I recognize this means they're in pain, fear, or sadness, I don't get offended. So please don't take offense, even if it's offered."
I think it's helpful for us to recognize either when we do it ourselves or when we see it from someone else that trying to put the blame on, right? Because the judging we're talking about, there's 3 different ways that we judge. We judge ourselves, we judge others, we judge circumstances. So if we're judging someone else, if we're putting blame, it's your fault, this thing's fault on someone else or circumstances, it's like the mind's attempt to try to put it somewhere
Control.
besides in myself. I can't handle that being something I did. I cannot, there's my big invincible sign. I can't take responsibility for that right now because that hurts too bad. So I'm going to put it on you, or I'm going to put it on them, or I'm going to put it on this thing or these people because I can't handle that right now. And that's really all it is. I always tell people when someone says something to you or when you see something, I consider that the surface level, and you should never ever take anything at the surface level. Somebody says something to you, you want to look beneath that, right? What are they really saying? What's really going on inside that person? Don't worry about what they said. Forget about the actual words that they said. Look deeper. Look beneath that. And then answer from above what they said. So that, we're going into a place immediately of attempting to understand what's really going on. And then we're always answering from that place of higher self, authentic self, sage self.
And
It's
and
beautiful to see what happens.
right, and to do that, just to help people get centered here, in the beginning of this kind of work, I can't really do that because my saboteurs are gonna come up thinking they're protecting me
That's right.
by starting to attack, and so when I do the work of identifying, befriending, working with in concert with my saboteurs and the information they provide, then I will have that space between me seeing
That's right.
someone do something and my negative reactivity where I can question what might be going on for them and actually do the step you just talked about.
The awareness is always first. All right. You cannot mend something if you don't know there's a problem. You cannot work with something you have not identified. So you're absolutely right. If you want to start to maximize your success levels, improve your relationships, gain a greater sense of well-being for yourself, you first have to start to identify what's keeping you from that. Where is it showing up? How is it showing up? What does it look like? What are the circumstances? So it's all about awareness and getting super, super curious about what that looks like Because you're absolutely right. Until you know that, how could you possibly then create a shift? You can't say, I want to change, but I don't know what I'm changing.
Yep. Wonderful. Well, so I realize that we're pretty much out of time here, and I usually like to ask a closing question, but instead, I think we've covered a lot of stuff. Let me just ask you to tell people, how do you prefer they reach out to you and connect with you?
I love for people to say hello and to, ask questions and to talk about the takeaways that they've had from conversations like this. I think that's all so meaningful. So I would love to hear from anyone who's listened to our conversation today, Dr. Tim. People can reach out to me on my website. It's krisdriskill.com. It's spelled all with K's. So I'm sure Dr. Tim will have it on his show notes. You can
All
see
the
them
links will be
there.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, or on LinkedIn, where it's my full name, Kristina Driskill. I'm over on LinkedIn, doing work there as well. Or they could just email me directly. Just email me at Kristina, it's my name with a K, Kristina@gildedwithin.com. Gilded Within is what I name my business because I believe that everything that happens outside of us starts with what's inside of us. And if we can understand and connect with and build the value of what is within us, then our outer world will begin to reflect that.
Wonderful. Well, I greatly appreciate your being willing to share this with me, and thanks for the pointing me in the direction of Shirzad's book, which was a delight. And I look forward to our next connection. I'm sure we'll have another chance to talk in the not too distant future.
It would be my absolute joy. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you today.
You're entirely welcome and deserving, as we like to say.
Thank you, sir.
Kristina Driskill, Doctorate of Musical Arts, is an international opera singer turned transformational coach and consultant, author, and presenter. Her light-hearted yet deeply intuitive approach has empowered high performers to live and work with ease, fun, and flow since 2007. Chris's fascination with mental fitness and mindset began with her doctoral research on performance anxiety, and her current work focused on self-sabotage, which is backed by the evidence-based research of positive intelligence. She is a certified coach in business coaching, mindset coaching, and she holds a doctorate in performance from West Virginia University, in addition to holding a certification in social emotional arts from UCLA Arts and Healing, part of the UCLA program of integrative medicine. Bridging the gap between intuition, science, and strategy, Kris guides her clients through her signature conscious reality method, a life-changing process that results in higher performance, improved relationships, and a greater sense of self, success, and fulfillment.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.